You're tuned in to the Dakota Housing Network on Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com. In-depth discussion and analysis of real estate issues nationwide and those issues unique to our area. Our team of experts includes Joe Sheehan, Greg Larson, Dave Flohr, Brian Ritter, and a great variety of guests. The Dakota Housing Network begins now on Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com.
And welcome to the Dakota Housing Network. I'm Greg Larson, along with my good friend
Dave Flohr.
And we are happy to tell you we're here with a guest who is also a good friend and the walking library of North Dakota politics.
Oh.
The Government Affairs Director.
I know who it is.
Oh, go. Take your guess.
It's Nancy Willis, I bet.
I bet it is.
Okay.
Well, hi, everyone. Hi.
Nancy's the Government Affairs Director for the North Dakota Association of Realtors. And I have played around politics for most of my adult life, and I have not met anybody who studies this stuff and is a walking encyclopedia like Nancy is.
We have two encyclopedias on today.
That's right.
Because we have Jim.
We have the chairman of the board.
Hello.
Rock
Jim
and Roll,
Walsh, who is
Walking
the
Encyclopedia of Rock and Roll Knowledge.
Walking Encyclopedia, who said it's time for us to do Stevie Ray Vaughan as we enter and leave the program today.
Right. And then Nancy is the Walking Encyclopedia of Real Estate Politics.
It isn't
or just politics in general.
Politics in general.
Oh, boy. Okay.
I don't know anybody.
It's a high bar I have to meet.
We have the important things covered then.
That's right.
Rock and roll and politics. What else are you needing?
And today's radio program, we're going to talk about the recently passed session, what went on, and what's of importance to real estate and to lenders and folks who think about buying a home. So we're going to talk about that. Nancy, in your opinion, what was the stellar moment of the session?
Well, I think for property owners, it has to be the state buy down of social services from the counties, because that way, going forward, now that the state is paying for social services, there will be a continual reduction in property taxes for property owners.
Right. So in the past couple of sessions, we've done a property tax buy-down, the state legislature has, and everyone knew, including them, that that wasn't going to be maintained.
Yeah, it would be sustainable.
So this time, in replace, as you just said, basically the legislature got out of the property tax business.
Okay, so I have a question about that. Now, I've read some things where, they're taking on the county social services over. They're getting rid of the buy down. Mm-hmm. But the county social services, the cost is only, the number I don't know for sure, $180 million, and the buy down was 300 and something. So there's still this gap. Okay, so the state's taken this much off the table, but the locals are actually getting, or the individuals like us as property taxpayers, were getting X amount that's that much higher. So how are the local jurisdictions going to make that up?
Well,
higher taxes or not? What's going to? That's the question.
Yeah, and I think that is the question, because the percentage that the state had bought down was 12%.
Yeah.
The value of social services is about 7.2%.
Okay.
So there is that difference there between the 12% and the 7.2%. But the state would not have been able to continue at that 12% level.
Yeah.
So the fact that now at that 7.2, and obviously if social services costs increase, they'll continue to cover that. So property owners will get that 7.2 and possibly more down the road if social services costs increase, because the state will take care of that. I think you can look at it two ways. You can look at that you've lost that difference, that whatever 4%
Yeah.
or you can look at it that if the state hadn't been able to sustain it, maybe there wouldn't have been any property tax reduction, and now going forward into the future, that there's this guaranteed because they've taken over the cost.
So if they would have kicked the can down the road, as the popular saying is, and done this one more biennium with the buy down, then we get to 2019, and all of a sudden we got even less money available, and they couldn't do the social services either.
Right,
at
exactly.
that point. Okay.
Exactly.
So that's what kind of gets lost in the other side of it, in the discussion, and that you have to keep that in mind.
Well, and I think a lot of the discussion that's been taking place over the last few years is, definitely property owners are concerned about their property taxes and would like to see lower property taxes. But I think everybody needs to start thinking about what is it that property taxes are paying for, and what do you want to pay for, and what are you willing to pay in order to get those services. Local municipalities have to be able to pay for infrastructure like the streets after, the winters that we've had. And the question is, how are you going to pay for that? I know there's a discussion, for example, in Bismarck about an increase in the sales tax. So I think that that is a good discussion for people to think about. If they don't want to do it through property tax, they have to do it through some other means, but there has to be a way to pay for schools, to pay for infrastructure, to pay for these things. And those are local, expenses. So that's why the state said, we did this when we had money, but we really need to get out of it because that's not our role.
Yeah, I think that's the correct call. And it really, that's stuff that should be handled locally, and you've got the city commissions to decide this is what we're going to prioritize and spend money on. If we don't like that as people, we can voice our opinion at commission meetings and vote different people in, etc.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, Nancy, the state doesn't even have the constitutional authority to charge a property tax.
No.
So the fact that they're involved in property taxes, it was never probably a good idea, but it was the way they got the surplus money back to the people. Because you can't, we heard, well, why don't we just get a check back like Alaska does? Can't do that in North Dakota because it's constitutional. Secondly, most of the land in Alaska that they're drawing oil from is public land, state-owned land. Most of the oil here is private property or Indian land, Native American land, and so the state doesn't receive the kind of income that Alaska does.
They're getting taxes.
Right.
That's it.
So they don't have the wherewithal to just give the money back. So they saw the 14% buy-down as a way to return some of the excess money. Well, the excess money's gone, and so now they're taking the responsibility, I think, of paying for those mandates that they put on the local governments. You will have schools. You will have social services.
And that's the thing about, too, is, we live in as far as like streets and whatnot, we live in a harsh climate for a few months out of the year, and there's a lot of money spent on street repairs every year.
Okay, just define few.
Yeah. Well, I'm being generous. Okay. So that we have to take that into consideration, and that we are a growing community. Bismarck, Fargo, etc. We all are. You have to take all that into account, and how else are you going to pay for some stuff? So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to take a break. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about property tax and then some of the other items that happened in the legislature.
Right now, 58.
Here's Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons on Super Talk 1270.
Kind of like listening to old Stevie Ray, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
However, welcome back to the Dakota Housing Network. As much as we'd like to rock out here with popcorn and bologna, we probably ought to be talking real estate.
I saw Stevie Ray on.
Did you?
Ever see him?
No.
Saw him at Fargo Civic Center. It was pretty awesome. I don't know how he did it, but he probably played, but because it was like fingers are all flying all over the place. And
I have not had the opportunity to see him. I saw B.B. King 4 times.
Yeah, I saw B.B. Yeah.
And I saw a few other guitar players. But
yeah. So anyway, we were talking property taxes.
We were talking property tax.
I have a question. Okay, contentious issue, obviously. And one of the complaints I hear is that you've got your house paid for, and you're still paying for it with property tax. Now, obviously, you're paying for services in your community, road repair, lights, street lights, all that good stuff. So you need to pay something for that stuff. But they say, if you're on a fixed income and property taxes keep going up, that can cause some people a problem. Now, they've tried to deal with that in other states, haven't they? California was the famous Proposition 13, and that
Yep.
didn't really work out too well, and that basically capped property taxes, right? So would that be a solution where if you are over a certain age and you've owned your house for X number of years that your property taxes are what they are today. When you sell it, they would go up to based on what that home then is valued at, whatever the price is at that time when you sell it. Does that have any merit to alleviate some of this anxiety?
And that's why we have Nancy on the program.
Yeah.
Well, in North Dakota, there is the homestead tax credit.
Yes.
And so that is for people that are 65 and older or that are disabled. It does hold, their property taxes at a certain level. They can get a tax credit back to help them with that. I think those are all going to have to be discussions if, in fact, people don't want to pay property tax. And I agree with you. I think the people that are most concerned are those on a fixed income.
Yeah.
Because as their property valuations continue to increase, it makes it harder for them to be able to afford it.
Well, frankly, once you retire, you're kind of on a fixed income.
Yep.
No matter what,
Yeah.
you may have a lot of money, but you're still on a fixed
Yeah,
income.
maybe a large fixed income.
Yeah, it might be, but it is a fixed income. You're not going to go out and get a different job to increase your pay. But
And that's a concern in North Dakota because we have a large older population. The projections are that that's going to grow significantly. So, I think the oil activity was good for North Dakota because we got an influx of a lot of younger people that we wouldn't have otherwise.
And it seemed like a lot of them stayed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that helps. But still, that is going to become a bigger issue for municipalities about how they're going to pay for services.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about kicking the can down the road. If there were no property tax, it kicks all those problems down the road.
Yeah.
The municipality is still going to have to pay for services unless you don't want police, unless you don't want fire, unless you're willing to drive on dirt, those sorts of things. So,
and you can say, well, okay, you could increase the sales tax or fees. Okay, and then I'm only paying for what I go out and buy in the community, and if I choose to stay at my home the whole time and not do anything other than go for a walk, I'm not going to have to pay anything, right? Buy groceries, I guess, or or something that's got a tax on it. But
all those expenses still are passed on to the fixed income people too.
Yeah,
Their carton of milk costs more. Their gas will cost more.
Yeah.
So it's an issue.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it's best solved locally. I certainly don't want the United States government telling me how I can drink water or where I can get my water.
Yeah.
I don't want the United States government telling me I have to turn my lights off at 10 to save electricity. And if I live in Bismarck, I don't want the state telling me I have to turn my lights off at 9:30 to save electricity.
Yeah.
Or the city telling me I can't drive on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah. So
I think it's going to make people have to think harder about what their priorities are.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really been left to government. People get angry about the decisions government makes, but when you have less money, like the legislature had this session, and if you are not willing to pay for certain things, like what might happen if property taxes are high, or you don't want to pay more for products with sales taxes, then you as the individual citizen are going to have to make a decision about what are your priorities in your community that you're willing to pay for, and how much are you willing to pay for that.
Yeah, it's easy to demand. Here's my really redneck comment, but it's really easy to demand services if you're not going to pay for it. Or if you don't think you're paying for it.
Yeah. I'm not paying for that. Yeah, you are.
Like saying it's easy to be generous with other people's money.
There you go.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so did we beat that horse?
I think that horse is frothed.
So there's other stuff that happened at the legislature related to real estate. So Nancy, what else you got?
Well, some of the things that people might be interested in are If somebody is renting property, they're now allowing a landlord to charge 2 months' rent as security rather than 1 month rent as security. And the rationale for that was that there are a lot of individuals who, for whatever reason, are felons or have had problems in the past with credit and currently are not able to find rentals. That maybe if they have the ability to pay a little more, that will make landlords more willing to rent to them.
Oh,
so
okay.
that was a bill that passed. There was another bill that passed that said that if a property is coming up for foreclosure because of a tax lien, that now there is a process where they have to ensure that they have given enough notification to anybody who might have an ownership right for that property. There was a concern that sometimes these properties come up for auction, and the person who is the rightful owner has no idea because the communication has actually gone to somebody that is, a lesser on the property or that, has some kind of responsibility for the property but is not the actual owner of the property.
Okay. So would that apply to, like, heirs of, like a kid?
Right. Anybody who
child.
who on record has a right to that property now has to get notification.
Okay, when you say on record, so say I'm, I forgot to pay my property taxes for the last 3 years, and now they're coming after my property. Do they have to notify my kids, even though I'm the only one on title?
No, if you're the
it's
only
not like
one
that.
on title, then it would just be you.
Yeah,
But
okay.
in some cases, there is a registered agent, like at the Secretary of State's office, like a law office that's representing the owner, and they'll send the notice to that agent, but the owner will never be aware.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what they're trying to avoid.
Okay. All right.
Another law that passed requires that an authorized agent who presents a deed to the county recorder, there has to be on that deed a statement of what was paid for that property, the full consideration of that property, so that somebody can, if they want to find out what the price was, that they can access that. And there are certain forms that on which that has to be done. And there's also in that law that passed, if somebody falsifies what the price of that property is, they could be guilty of a Class B misdemeanor.
Okay, so it used to, you can say, sold for $1 and other consideration is a common thing. So that's out the door now completely, or just in certain cases?
In all cases.
All
it
cases.
has to have the actual amount of what
So
the
you can't
property
say
was sold
$1 and other consideration anymore, period. Okay.
unless it was only $1.
Yeah,
Then
right.
you can
right.
say that.
Yeah, okay.
There is a legislative management study that would would look at an inmate housing construction program. There is an idea that inmates really need to learn more trades and better trades, so when they get out, they're able to find work. And that's a program that's been successful in South Dakota, so that was a suggestion for North Dakota as well. There was a law that we proposed that we were very interested in that changes the term limits for the North Dakota Real Estate Commission members to limit them to 2 5-year terms. Our thought was it's good to have turnover so that people that bring issues to the Real Estate Commission, that there are people there that are consistently coming in with new ideas, new perspectives. We think that's good for the public that happens.
Okay.
There's a new law also that for those apartment complexes that have a no pet policy, by federal law they're required, if somebody is disabled and has a right to have a service animal or a companion animal, to have one. The law says if they're not truthful in having that disability, that they could be guilty of an infraction and have to have a $1,000 penalty, and the landlord doesn't have to rent to them.
And with that, happy news. We'll be back after the break.
Right now, 58.
Dave Ramsey is heard here. Super Talk 1270.
And we are back to the Dakota Housing Network with Dave Flohr and Nancy Willis and the chairman of the board, Jim Walsh.
We surround ourselves with knowledge.
That's right, so we don't have to be smart.
Exactly. All right.
It's great. It's been working good so far.
Yeah, it's worked good my whole life, actually.
And by the way, Jim, happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, it's not his birthday, but eventually it will be.
Oh,
I want to
okay.
be ahead of the game.
Okay.
Because
Boy,
I will
you are
forget.
proactive.
7 months away.
Well, then I can say happy birthday to everybody I know.
Yeah.
Happy
His birthday might be coming up this year.
It could be
Happy
coming.
birthday,
Yeah.
Greg.
Thank
Alice
you.
in Wonderland, they did that, remember?
Yeah.
Yep.
No, on
Happy
birthday.
on birthday.
Happy on birthday.
That way you get a party every day but one.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
probably how
so-
it should be.
Yeah, we were talking about carbon monoxide detectors.
Yeah, one of the interesting issues that has been coming up more recently during the sessions is the question of personal responsibility. Who is responsible for keeping people safe in apartment dwellings, in homes? In this session, there was a bill that was proposed that would have required testing for radon when a house changed ownership. There was a lot of discussion about how that would happen because right now there really is no methodology to police that. So who would do it? Would the inspectors do it? Who exactly
And
would do it?
what's an acceptable test?
Well, and that
I
was
can
the other
go
question.
get one at Lowe's, or do I have to have a person come in with one of their units?
Well,
and
they
do
did
it,
have
know?
a specific requirement. The problem is that there are different levels that different agencies have decided are dangerous for you or not.
Oh, yeah.
So the question was, even if this test is done according to what was going to be required, whose level are you going to take as the level that puts you at risk?
Yeah, and there are some standards, national standards, and interestingly, they're different in all over the countryside. Like we were, it's with radon. It's a measurement of radiation. It's not a parts per million or anything. And the United States used to be at 25, 0.25, or no, 25, whatever it is. Now we're 0.4 of the same measurement. Canada, for years, was 18 on this measurement. Now they're just dropping theirs to 0.4. So, as they do more studies, it's going to change. And, folks, if you want to know if you have radon in North Dakota, I'll just tell you, you probably do.
Yeah.
We are a radium, or uranium-rich state. It occurs naturally everywhere in the state. So in theory, and what radon is, it's a gas that's produced by the breakdown of uranium into radon. And so as uranium breaks down naturally, radon gas is released. It becomes dangerous when it collects somewhere and concentrates. But in theory, you could go anywhere in the state of North Dakota, put a radon test on the ground, cover it with a 5-gallon bucket, and record radon. It's just
You
there.
look at a map, and North Dakota's it's
Right.
covered. There's not a spot in North Dakota that doesn't have it, I don't think.
So it's just there. So you can have most of the home inspectors that are licensed and bonded through the state of North Dakota Secretary of State's office. You can go to their website, find a list. Most of those guys will do a radon test. I'm going to guess, and this is a guess, they're going to run somewhere between $100 and $200. And you get a very accurate 3-day recording of the radon levels in your home. You can do that. You can go to Lowe's. You can go to Home Depot, somewhere other than Bismarck, Menards,
You can go to a
Ace
store.
Hardware, and you can buy a radon test. And they run anywhere, I think the average price probably $25. Am I close on that?
$25, $30.
$25. You buy it. You open it up in your basement, and after 3 days, you pack it up, you ship it off, and they'll send you back a test result. Or you can go to the North Dakota Department of Health. They will give you a box. And you do the test, you ship it off, and they send back a result. And I think you have to pay like $5 to get the result. But so you can test for radon. The trick is, what does it mean?
Yeah.
And that's what the issue with that one was. Okay, when a house changes hands, a new house is built, it needs to be tested for radon. Okay, who does the test? Who gets the results? Do you hire an inspector that's licensed to do it? Do you buy the box? Do you? that sort
and
of
that
thing.
was one of the legislators' concerns, is the way the bill was written. It really didn't say what to do. It just
How
said
did it?
you had to test.
Okay, boy. Yeah.
So once you test, well, then what happens?
Yep.
Yeah,
So
and,
the-
okay, so then I'm buying the house from you, Nancy, and it's at 0.2. It's low.
yeah,
Well, it's got radon. I'm not going to buy it.
right. They can do
So
it now.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
But really, that would be good.
yeah.
That's not a problem, probably.
So, yeah. Then I think, Nancy, if I'm correct, that's why the bill didn't go very far, because it was too ambiguous and no one was willing to try to drill it down into something.
No.
And then, as you said at the break, those folks who write the codes, the building codes.
Yeah, the Associated General Contractors testified that there is already a discussion about construction that will, in the future, be done in such a way to minimize the amount of radon that can come into your home, and that's something they're already working on. So the legislature felt, well, let it take its course, and let's not have a bill, that we really don't need at this stage.
But like you said too on the break, is that there's not a problem with Bismarck, Fargo, Mandan, and Grand Forks might not adopting the code, but there is a problem with that not being available in the small town, maybe.
That is what a lot of the fire chiefs testified to, that the fire codes and the building codes are often adopted by the large cities, but not necessarily by the small communities. And if it's not adopted, then it's not enforced.
So that applies to radon testing or
Right, or
Fire alarms,
carbon
smoke
monoxide
detectors, carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
the other bill had to do with carbon monoxide, and that one was a very emotional bill. There were a number of people who brought the bill originally that were family members who had members of their family who had passed away as a result of carbon monoxide poisoning. And similar to radon, it's a colorless, odorless gas. It results from combustion engines, so it could come from, mainly it happens in the colder months, when people have a malfunctioning furnace or a bad heater, or some people might turn their ovens on to heat their house. If you have an attached garage and you leave your car running and you get carbon monoxide in your house, it can happen other times of the year too. I mean, anything that has a combustion engine, a lawnmower, you name it, if it's malfunctioning and it's in an enclosed place, somebody could be affected. And it's very quick. People pass out, and so unfortunately, because it happens quickly, they don't have the ability to call for help. And that's usually where the fatalities occur. So again, the original bill talked about any time that a property was transferred, and the question came up again, well, who is going to police that, And the inspectors testified that it would be difficult for them because they would have to hire more inspectors in order to do that. The inspectors, the city inspectors, communities have limited budgets, so how are they going to be able to afford to hire more inspectors? So then they limited it to just rental properties. And really, again, it just was a matter of personal responsibility. Should landlords be responsible for ensuring that every tenant have a carbon monoxide alarm or detector in their unit? The feeling was that yes, if it was done in a certain manner, the Landlord Association was supportive of it, but ultimately the governor vetoed it. He felt that it really is a personal responsibility issue.
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about, people paying for services. Well, if the city's going to say, well, we have to hire another inspector at, whatever the pay would be to go out and inspect all these units.
Plus,
I don't want to pay for that. That person should put their own detectors.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So you get back to that question. Yeah.
So no state law related to carbon monoxide detectors.
Yeah, I will say that there are some builders in Fargo that I'm aware of, in Bismarck that I'm aware of, one in Dickinson that I'm aware of, who now, as they're building new homes, are venting them for carbon monoxide. They're running the vents.
Oh.
Or
Well,
for radon, excuse me.
Radon,
for radon.
They're running the vents in the house, so if you want to do it, you hook up the little pump and you're ready to go, because the pipe is in the house.
Yeah.
And they're also putting an outlet somewhere near the garage. I think they're supposed to be 5 feet off the floor, a carbon, whatever it is, that amount of space. They're putting an outlet there so you can plug in a carbon monoxide detector.
Well, and for new construction, it is required that there be carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of the new construction, there are combined smoke detector carbon monoxide detectors, and that is what new construction is adding to their building. So it really was directed at rental properties, and the thought was that type of housing that's not new. How do you protect people? But if people are listening out there, I would suggest everybody get
just go get one.
Yeah. They're inexpensive. You can get them at Lowe's. You should have one somewhere close to where you have your furnace, and then somewhere where you're sleeping, in the hallway where your bedrooms are, where you're sleeping.
And and you can get them a combined one that's hardwired or battery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, we actually had we have a combined one, and this was 3-4 years ago. It went off. No, I had just replaced the battery, so I knew the battery was okay. And it went off. Well, we called the fire department, and they came over and they tested. They couldn't. They said you just must have a malfunctioning unit. So, but it was fine. But that's it worked. And they said, don't worry about calling us. He said, he said, you gotta, don't mess around with it. So.
Okay, I think we're going away for our final break, and we will come back and in 12 minutes or less tell you everything else that happened during the legislative session.
Right Now 64.
The Red River Farm Network. Ag News is here on Super Talk 1270.
And Stevie Ray Vaughan is carrying on again. And welcome back to the final segment for today of the Dakota Housing Network. I'm here with Dave Flohr. I'm Greg Larson, and we're here with Nancy Willis, our political expert and guru.
I'm feeling way smarter than when I started today. I know that.
It's like going to a civics class.
Yeah,
every time.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe some other just quick information for folks out there about some of the things during session that affect them. There was a bill that passed that establishes flat fees for the recording of deeds and mortgages. And why is that important? Because when you're going to buy a house or sell a house, a lot of times when you come to that closing, all of a sudden you find out that check you wrote might not be the right amount because there might be an additional fee here or an additional fee there. This was designed to minimize that, to make sure that ahead of time what you're told is going to be the fee for those recording documents is the fee that you're going to have to pay.
So there's a flat fee based on how many pages.
Correct.
So
and the way they set the flat fee, it was based on the average number of pages that usually a mortgage or deed are, plus they added a little bit just to make sure that flat fee doesn't change.
It's actually, I think, a good change.
It is a good change.
Yeah, and the other benefit of this is everybody will be making sure their documents are. Oh, we don't want to go up to that because then it's going to cost me more. So let's shorten that thing up.
Yeah,
less paper.
And I think it's better for the recorders too, because I think they're actually, there hasn't been an increase in fees for a while.
Right, not since 2011.
I think they're actually getting a little bump here, so it's good for their fees because, once again, if there's an expense to buying a house, and if you don't pay the expense when you buy the house, then everybody else's taxes have to cover it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and it's a nice separation because if you've ever seen a purchase of oil land or purchase of farmland, we're not talking about 6 pages. We're talking about a document.
Yeah.
And so that takes the residential stuff away from it.
It's a report.
It is.
It's a book.
Yeah.
So some other things, you're going to see a little bit of an increase in your phone bill for your 911 tax. And that's because the infrastructure...
That's a fee, though, isn't it? Not a tax.
Well, it's under the tax laws. But,
okay.
but the issue is that the state radio, their infrastructure needs to be brought up to modern day
Yeah.
technology. And so that was the idea, that they needed to increase that a little bit to ensure that they could go ahead and do that, which is a benefit to everybody in our state.
Isn't that a loss of landline going to mostly cell phones? Isn't it adapting to that?
I think that's a lot
I
of
think
it.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cell phone fee
Yeah.
is going to increase a little
So if
bit.
you don't want the fee to go up, get rid of your cell phone, go back to your landline.
There you go.
Exactly. There you go.
That's going to happen.
We followed a quick take eminent
Right?
domain
Oh,
bill.
man, did we ever.
For the water boards, and really what happened with that bill was, after a lot of discussion about better communication, when water boards are looking to use quick take eminent domain in order to take land that they need, what the bill does is it extends the period of time in which communication and negotiation has to take place with the landowner, and it has a specific process for doing it. Some people said it now becomes medium take because of the length of time, not really quick take anymore. And there also is a prohibition from when you're negotiating to threaten quick take as a way to try and speed things up. So
Yeah, and this is really a bill. If you want to call it a punishment bill, it's a punishment bill, because some water districts and some engineers working for water districts were really abusing it.
Oh, okay.
And so we've gone from getting rid of quick take altogether to making it a reasonable process. And folks, quick take just means that it's an eminent domain action where an easement is taken or a right-of-way for a road is taken, and it doesn't change the right to your day in court to establish what the eminent domain might cost you, what you might expect as a benefit. It keeps the project moving.
Oh,
You have
okay.
to go to a judge. The judge has to authorize the quick take, and then sets a court date to hear about it. But once the judge authorizes that easement, you can go ahead and keep the project going.
Okay, so the argument comes on more about compensation of the landowner.
Exactly. But a lot of folks use it as a velvet hammer. It's
Yeah.
like, you can give us this easement or we'll take it.
Yeah. Okay.
And
there
that's
was
not
That seems
the
fair.
way it should be done.
yeah, and there was
Yeah.
a companion law that passed that requires that the Attorney General have information on the Attorney General's website defining what quick take is, what
Yeah.
eminent domain is, what the process is, so that people have a better idea
Yeah.
of how that takes place.
Quick take was most important to keep it in place, really, not so much in the Bismarck-Mandan area, in our radio area, but the Red River Valley.
Okay.
With flood protection, all that stuff is going to come through a water resource district. Without quick take, the diversion could be tied up for years.
Sure. Yeah.
Just in eminent domain issues. And the folks have the right to be compensated. I'm not saying that. But it's been a very effective tool to tie up a project, because you get a court date for one guy, and you court date for the next guy, and a court date for the next guy.
Yeah. So it's not like a class action thing.
No.
Everybody's going to say, okay, you hire somebody, I'll hire somebody,
Right.
and we'll all go to court
And I will
separately.
tell you that I
Yeah.
am somewhat involved with one quick take, which is just an easement, not taking the property. We will have the project completed before we ever get a court date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
And then you argue about what you can compensate.
Yeah.
And it's a good idea to have more information out there, because that is something that most people are not going to understand or worry about till it happens to them.
And
Yeah.
similarly to that quick take legislation, which again, trying to make sure that the people affected understand the process and that there's communication. Another bill passed related to wind turbines and working with wind energy companies, where there's now an ombudsman in the Department of Agriculture to help people if they're negotiating with wind companies, and establishes some additional requirements for distance from property boundaries and things like that.
Yeah, okay.
So again, some property rights issues to improve for property owners.
And they talked about having an ombudsman for the
For the
quick
water.
take eminent domain deal.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, there's not enough quick take happening
Right.
Oh,
to pay for an
Okay.
ombudsman. But the threat, the folks looking for the easement, the threat of quick take has been a common tool, and not necessarily a good one.
yeah.
And then we were disappointed, and Dave can talk about this, the Housing Incentive Fund, which provides tax credits for people who would like to assist with low-income housing.
Yeah, well, affordable housing is it's a big topic, not just in North Dakota; it's nationwide. It's an issue, and it's certainly in the news a lot about that. That is a crisis, as the term gets used a lot these days. But it's certainly serious, and that was a mechanism to. The Housing Incentive Fund was a mechanism to use in combination with other things to create some lower cost, affordable housing for folks that were working at the Walmarts and the Targets and et cetera and whatnot. And they didn't get rid of it, but there's no new money for it.
Right. There's still the authorization to be able to do it, but they didn't appropriate any dollars.
So
to do the match for the.
So
tax
maybe next
credits.
time we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Well, it's a good program, but there's a lot of good programs. At least
they
put
had
on hold.
they had to make their priorities.
All right. Well, Nancy, thank you for being here. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thanks for having
Dave,
me.
as always. Jim, we will. I will not see you next week. I will be. Nancy and I are both going to Washington D.C. to keep America safe for realtors and homeowners.
Well, hallelujah. I think Brian will be here next week anyway.
I think Brian's here next week,
all
and
right.
so maybe the week after we'll talk about what happened in D.C.
There you go. Okay.
Thank